Some days move along in a familiar rhythm. You wake up in the morning, sunlight still slipping through the window at the same old angle. The road to work has not changed. The coffee is still warm in your hand. From the outside, everything looks fine. And for Taurus, that kind of fine once felt precious, a sense of order that kept the heart calm, that kept life from being shaken by too many surprises. Taurus is often like that, holding things steady long enough to feel safe. No need to rush, no need to change unless it truly feels necessary. There are seasons when that quiet endurance carries Taurus through challenges that others might have walked away from much earlier. And then, something subtle happens. You wake up one morning, the same room, the same sound of traffic outside, the same familiar schedule waiting ahead, yet inside, a very light emptiness appears. Not loud, not dramatic, just a vague feeling, like standing in a familiar room where the light feels slightly dimmer than usual. It does not feel exactly like sadness. It does not feel exactly like anxiety. It is more like a small flame still burning steadily, but the warmth no longer spreading the way it once did. Taurus might notice it in ordinary moments, sitting quietly, watching cars pass in the evening, pausing at a familiar intersection, and suddenly realizing the steps have slowed without meaning to. It is not easy to name this feeling. Maybe it is tiredness, maybe it is boredom, or maybe it is simply a part of something deeper inside asking to be heard. Taurus is not someone who constantly digs through emotions, but when this quiet sense of something missing shows up, it tends to stay, like a gentle knock on an inner door. Not demanding, not urgent, just a soft reminder that something may be shifting. The stability that once felt like a shelter now carries a silent question with it. Not a big question about right or wrong, gain or loss. Just a small thought drifting through. Am I living in rhythm with what is moving inside me? Or am I continuing simply because everything feels familiar? Some people rush to find an answer. Taurus usually does not. Taurus tends to sit with the feeling a little longer, like standing beneath a late-night streetlight, looking down an empty road, not rushing to turn, just quietly noticing where they are in that moment. And maybe that slowness matters. Not to force change, but to understand more clearly what has begun to disturb the inner calm. Sometimes, simply recognizing that the feeling exists is already a gentle act of care toward yourself. In that quiet space, Taurus may begin to notice the heartbeat again, the breath, and even small desires that were set aside long ago. There is no need to reach a conclusion. No need to fix anything right away, just being there, in a very honest moment, allowing the heart to speak for itself about what it needs now. Not through clear words, but through very small signals. An unconscious sigh, a moment of staring a little farther than usual, a sense of slowing down while everything around keeps moving at the same old pace. Those signals do not ask for immediate action. They only ask to be noticed. Like a small flame wanting to be shielded from the wind so it does not go out in the middle of the night. And then, in very ordinary moments, a question appears. Not loudly, not shaped like a major decision. It comes while waiting at a red light, the traffic signal casting a pale yellow glow onto the pavement, bright enough to see, soft enough to think. It comes when most of the lights in the room are off, leaving only the faint glow of a digital clock and the distant sound of the city breathing somewhere far away. The thought passes gently, like a breeze brushing your shoulder. If I keep moving forward out of habit like this, is there something quietly slipping by that I have not noticed yet? The question carries no blame. It does not say the present is wrong. It simply creates a pause between two breaths, long enough for the heart to realize where it is. Sometimes Taurus lets the question drift away, because tomorrow still brings work to be done, and familiar responsibilities are already waiting. But sometimes it stays, clinging lightly to the mind, like the scent of rain lingering on a jacket even after the storm has passed. That aftertaste changes the way familiar things are seen. The same road still leads home, but the steps slow by just one beat. The same conversations continue, yet inside, there is now a quiet space that has not been filled. It is not a desire to leave. It is a desire to understand more deeply why staying still feels different now, why this choice keeps being made. At times, the question becomes a silent companion. It does not demand an immediate answer. It simply reminds you that parts within are growing, changing, and asking to be seen, like a seed resting beneath thick soil. No one knows exactly when it will rise to the surface, but the movement began long ago. In moments like these, Taurus may realize that not having an answer can also be a valid place to stand. Not every question needs to be solved right away. Some questions exist only to widen the inner space, to give the heart more room to breathe, more room to feel. And that acceptance, accepting the uncertainty, accepting what is not yet clear, can bring a different kind of peace, a deeper, quieter peace, like a late-night lamp that does not erase the darkness, but offers enough warmth that you no longer feel alone. In that softened light, Taurus begins to notice something very small. The heaviness does not arrive all at once. It gathers slowly, like a thin layer of dust settling over familiar objects in a home. At first, no one notices. Only when a hand brushes across the surface does the palm come away gray, and only then does it become clear that time has been passing in its own quiet way. The things that once felt safe are still there. They look the same. They have not changed their shape. But their weight feels different now. A relationship that once felt protective can sometimes leave the heart a little heavier after each conversation. A role once worn with quiet pride now feels like a thick coat on a humid day. Not because it is wrong, but because the body inside has changed. Taurus is not someone who lets go easily. What is chosen to stay is usually held for a long time, with patience, with responsibility. On some late nights, when all the sounds have faded, Taurus is still sitting there, wondering why the thought of familiar things now brings a sense of tiredness. The feeling does not explode. It does not disturb the outside world. It simply lingers, like an invisible cord tightening a little more with each passing year. That heaviness is often too subtle to be called a problem. It slips into the smallest details. A pause before replying to a message, a quiet sigh when an old responsibility is mentioned, a moment of standing still at the front door, not quite ready to step inside even after arriving home. These moments feel like signals from the body and the mind, trying to say something without yet finding the right words. And Taurus, accustomed to endurance, often chooses silence. Not because the signs go unnoticed, but because disturbing a balance built over so much time does not feel easy. At first, that silence feels like a solution. It allows everything to keep running. Life continues. But over time, the silence becomes another weight, as the things left unsaid begin to stack quietly on top of one another. There are moments when Taurus realizes they are holding everything in place with sheer effort, even though something inside no longer fits the same way. Like carrying a suitcase filled with items from a road already traveled. No one says it has to be put down. But each step becomes heavier than the last. And in that very quiet moment, when the shoulders begin to ache, a thought passes through gently. Maybe it is time to look again at what is being carried and to ask, without judgment, why it has been taken this far. That question does not need an answer right away. It simply rests there, like a small stone in a pocket, just enough that each time a hand brushes against it, you remember what you are carrying. And from that moment, a very gentle idea begins to form. Not about giving something up, but about acknowledgement. Letting go sometimes does not look like a major decision. It feels more like standing in an old room, warm yellow light falling across familiar objects, each one holding its own memory. None of them are disliked. None of them need to be rejected. It is only that, while looking around, Taurus can sense the room has already fulfilled its role in another chapter of life. The walls that once offered protection, the corners that once brought comfort, are still there. Yet the person standing inside the room is no longer the same. That sense of fullness arrives very slowly, almost impossible to notice without stopping for a long while. It does not say the past was wrong. It does not deny what was built through patience and devotion. It simply whispers that some things have completed their purpose, and holding them tightly for longer no longer feels nourishing in the way it once did. For Taurus, the thought of letting go often carries a quiet ache. Being accustomed to endurance, to seeing things through to the end, the line between loyalty and quietly exhausting oneself can be very thin. Yet in the stillest moments, when the room holds nothing but the ticking of a clock, Taurus may realize that letting go does not mean throwing something away. It means setting it down with respect. Like tidying a space, there are items no longer used, yet still wiped clean, folded carefully, and placed in a corner as a silent thank you. Letting go in this way does not carry heavy regret. It opens just enough space for new air to move through. That space is not frightening. It feels like an early morning when a window is opened, a light breeze entering a quiet room, bringing an ease of breath you did not realize had been missing for so long. Once this thought appears, it rarely leaves. It does not push for action. It simply stays, quietly reminding you that allowing yourself to be lighter is also a way of honoring the road already traveled. And within that sense of fullness, Taurus can begin to look again at what is still being held. Not to judge, but to understand that sometimes strength lies in knowing when to keep carrying on and when it is possible to set something down, so the steps ahead can feel a little more free on the road forward. But just as that idea settles in, another feeling quietly appears. The feeling of standing in between, no longer fully on one side, yet not quite having stepped into the other. That space has no clear shape. It is a soft blur between two rhythms of life, where familiar things have begun to loosen their grip, and what comes next has not moved close enough to touch. That in-between space often arrives gently, without warning. It feels like standing on a bridge in the early morning, mist still covering the water below. Knowing for certain you do not want to turn back, because what lies behind is too familiar, too tight for the emotions that are still growing. Yet looking ahead, everything remains hazy. Only outlines appear, not yet fully formed. The feeling does not send Taurus into panic. It simply causes the steps to slow, almost by instinct. Taurus is used to solid ground. Decisions usually need time to settle, to be tested against an inner sense of safety. So when standing between two shores, with nothing firm to hold on to, hesitation arises naturally, not from a lack of courage, but from a habit of placing each step carefully before shifting full weight forward. There are days when that empty space makes time move more slowly. Life continues on the surface, yet inside, everything feels still. Like waiting for a late-night train, hearing announcements echo through a quiet station, knowing the train will arrive, just not knowing when. Taurus can feel that waiting clearly, in every breath, in every long look into the distance, in every silent moment when late-night lights reflect against glass. This stillness is sometimes mistaken for delay. But for Taurus, it feels more like a necessary pause, giving the body and the mind time to adjust to changes already unfolding within. Not every movement needs to be visible right away. Some steps begin by standing still long enough to realize you are no longer the same as before. Within that fog, Taurus learns how to stay with uncertainty without pushing it away. Learns that not seeing the road clearly ahead does not mean the road does not exist. Sometimes it is enough to remain still a little longer, allowing the eyes to adjust to the faint light in the distance, allowing the heart to soften around things that do not yet have a name. And within that stillness, which may look unmoving from the outside, a very quiet kind of courage begins to form. The courage not to turn back, even when the path ahead remains unclear. And the trust that when it is time to move again, the feet will know where to go. Before taking a real step forward, Taurus often needs a slow breath. Not to calculate more, not to decide what is right or wrong. Just a breath deep enough for the body to notice where it is and how it feels in this moment. That breath usually arrives on its own. It might come while sitting quietly in the car at dusk, watching streetlights turn on one by one like small points of fire. It might come while standing in the kitchen, one hand resting on the cool surface of the counter, listening to the steady sound of water from the tap. Those ordinary moments suddenly become a place of shelter. A place where Taurus does not need to appear strong and does not need to make any decision at all. When there is permission to pause like that, the body begins to speak in its own way, a brief sense of relief at the thought of not having to push any further, a quiet heaviness when touching something familiar. These signals do not judge. They do not demand immediate change. They simply exist. Like dim light in a quiet room, enough to see, enough to avoid searching in the dark. Taurus is used to acting with certainty, yet there are times when certainty does not come from doing more, but from settling inward. Settling enough to tell habit from true desire. Settling enough to notice that some things have been carried for too long simply because they once felt necessary, not because they still fit. Listening like this is not always comfortable. Sometimes it feels empty, like turning off all the lights before turning on a new one. Other times it brings a clear sense of relief, like taking off a wristwatch after a long day, letting the arm finally rest. These feelings do not need explanation. They only need to be acknowledged as real. No answers appear immediately after that slow breath, and perhaps they do not need to. Clarity, for Taurus, rarely arrives like a sudden flash of light. It comes more like a slow sunrise. At first, only a slight brightness along the edge of the sky. Then, gradually, shapes become clearer without being forced. In that quiet space, Taurus learns to trust inner sensations again, to trust that if a thought feels lighter when held, it may be worth keeping, and if something makes the body feel heavy, it may need to be looked at again, not with blame, but with kindness. From breaths like these, a very personal direction begins to take shape, not loudly, not in a rush, just real enough that when the time comes to move forward, each step carries the feeling of living in a way that feels true. And then, within that very slow current, letting go no longer looks like a grand act. It does not arrive with noise. It does not need approval from the outside. It happens on an ordinary day, when Taurus notices the hands are no longer clenched the way they once were. It might be one morning, looking at the phone, and no longer feeling the need to respond immediately to a message that once felt heavy. It might be an evening after work, turning onto a different street without a clear reason why. The changes are small, so small that almost no one notices. Yet inside, a new pocket of air quietly opens. Letting go at this point feels like setting a bag down by the side of the road. Not because the bag is bad, not because the path ahead is easier, simply because the shoulders have carried it long enough to know they need a moment of lightness. When the bag leaves the hands, the body responds right away. A deeper breath, the back straightening, the steps softening against the ground. There is no sense of victory, no surge of intense sadness, just a natural settling, like the wind easing and the water returning to stillness. Taurus might stand there for a while, not rushing to pick the bag up again, not rushing to walk away, just standing, feeling the shoulders bare in the breeze, feeling the ease spreading slowly through each breath. In that moment, the things that once drained Taurus do not disappear completely. They remain only now at a different distance. Without carrying them on the shoulders, they can be seen more clearly, no longer through the lens of obligation or habit. Some things are set down for good. Some are placed aside only for a while, long enough to know whether they still belong on the journey. Letting go in this way does not create a frightening emptiness. Instead, it opens a very quiet inner space, where Taurus can hear the sound of their own footsteps on the road of life more clearly. No more clattering of burdens colliding, only a steady, unhurried rhythm, like a heart that has finally released its tension. And within that quiet, another feeling begins to rise, the feeling of being allowed to be lighter without asking anyone for permission. No need to explain why things have changed. No need to prove that the choice is right. Just a simple knowing that in this moment, setting something down is the kindest thing that can be done for oneself. From that moment on, things do not necessarily change in any obvious way on the outside. The road stays the same. Days continue to follow one another through familiar routines. Yet inside, something has shifted very gently, like turning the light in a room down one notch. Not darker, just softer. Perhaps 2026 for Taurus does not need to be a year of answers. There is no need for a clear map, no need for a dramatic turning point. It feels more like a space opening up, wide enough for small questions to exist without being rushed toward resolution. Those questions do not demand action. They only ask to rest near the heart, waiting until the moment comes to be seen with different eyes. Within that space, moving slowly no longer feels like hesitation. It becomes a way of listening, a way of caring for inner places that are often overlooked, like sitting beneath a late-night lamp, allowing thoughts to pass without holding on to them, letting a sense of ease slip quietly into each breath. Not to arrive somewhere else, but simply to remain fully present with yourself in this moment. Some things may leave life on their own. Some things may stay, but in a different form. There is no need to name them, no need to know the outcome in advance. Only the kindness to recognize that much has already been carried, and that there is also a quiet right to become lighter in your own way. And then, one afternoon, when sunlight rests gently on a windowsill, or in a very ordinary moment standing still in the middle of a crowded street, Taurus may ask a single soft question. What, right now, allows my heart to feel the lightest? The question may not need an answer right away. It simply remains there, like a small flame, warm enough to illuminate the road ahead, and calm enough that the feeling stays with you long after the story itself has fallen silent.